And welcome to Season 4, Episode 3 of the Dolphin Pod. My name is Joe Foreman, alongside my co-host for today's episode, Nick Bivona of CSI Sportsnet. And Nick and I have quite a busy week ahead of us. We have a game coming up later today. This episode is being recorded earlier in the week on Tuesday. However, if you are watching our premiere, this episode is airing ahead of Saturday's game, our Heroes Day matchup with Holy Family University. That game will be the season finale for CSI Dolphins baseball. But Nick, we have plenty to talk about in regards to our spring sports. We covered CSI track and field earlier in the week as I got a chance to speak with track and field student athlete Ava Thompson, but we have plenty to get to when it comes to CSI Softball and CSI Baseball.
Yeah, very jam-packed action the last couple of days and last couple of weeks here at CSI in terms of softball and baseball-wise. Obviously, some other prior engagements with us as well on the other side, but nonetheless, it's been a lot of action to call here on whether it be on the headset or not, and softball and baseball have had a very interesting season this year, and I'm looking forward to talking about it.
We've gotten a chance to talk about it quite a bit during our games on CSI Sportsnet, but here today, we'll give you a bit more of a condensed recap of the 2024 season. For softball, let's go all the way back to the beginning. Softball's first two doubleheaders were played before the team departed for Florida, and just like they did last year, the Dolphins headed to Florida coming off a couple of wins against Chestnut Hill College. Of course, the team riding high, entering that Florida trip. And Nick, obviously you weren't down there in Florida, so I'll take the lead here talking about some of those games. And what you will be able to speak to, Nick, is that true to form, down in Florida, the Dolphins played some thrillers. They had an extra inning game that they fell just short in. They had another game that came down to the final out, a game which they won. They had several more games that came down to the final at bat. Of the 10, at least 6 or 7 came down to the very last out. So it was a very entertaining trip down in Florida. Unfortunately for the Dolphins, they came back having won just 2 of those games. But
it's a very long week for you regardless.
However, something big began when the Dolphins did return home from Florida. Eileen Balderas got a 30-game hitting streak started.
And let's just say that someone here is not very proud of what happened this past Saturday in terms of that hitting streak, but what a second year for Eileen Balderas this year, hitting above 400 on the season. A really big spark at that shortstop position for the Dolphins, both defensively and offensively for this team. You said it, Joe. She really provides a huge, momentous spot for this team, especially at the top of that lineup.
And let's talk about the CSI pitching staff. Obviously, in Florida, that pitching staff was taxed quite a bit. They did get a break when they came back, had a few days off after they returned from Florida before returning home to play Georgian Court University. That is the doubleheader where Balderas began her hitting streak. But let's talk about the players in the circle who made an impact for the Dolphins this year. Chief among them, newcomer, or at least a newcomer in terms of competing, Kennedy Ruth.
Kennedy Ruth was a really big, huge for the Dolphins this season, and you could make the case as certainly the number one starter in that rotation for them. And we'll speak about later on what she provided for this team at the end of the season, but she was really big for the Dolphins this year. Alexandra Frenza as well was huge for the Dolphins as the season went down to the stretch and gave them an opportunity to make that postseason berth. But having a number 1 and number 2 in that rotation is huge in terms of the Dolphins. And for Kennedy Ruth, she also provided some inning relief for the Dolphins when the Dolphins needed some save opportunities. So she was really relying, and Tracy Garofalo was certainly relying on her to come out of the bullpen and try to get them some wins.
And while I was in Florida, Nick, you were busy back here at the helm on Sportsnet covering CSI Dolphins baseball, and I got a chance to tune into those games, but those are some good ones, and there's nothing quite like being in the ballpark for an exciting finish like the ones you saw in those games while I was down in Florida. Right. Why don't you talk a bit about those games and what the outlook was for CSI baseball that early in the season? Things were really looking up.
And coincidentally, considering the fact that after this Dolphin Pod, they're facing the same team that they faced in Holy Family for Heroes Day, and that was 2 really exciting games. Considering the fact that the Dolphins came off their Myrtle Beach trip and started 1-5, it was a slow start for the Dolphins on the season. Then they came back against Caldwell, got that 7-1 win. Then they faced that Holy Family team on Sunday. 2 thrilling wins for the Dolphins, especially that Game 2 win. Nico Rodriguez, a walk-off RBI single, and a game as well with the Dolphins. It seemed as if the game was a game of momentum. It was swinging back and forth between both teams. We saw a lot of good pitching in that one as well. Antonio Gaucho, I remember vividly, came in relief when it was bases loaded, 1 out, got 2 straight strikeouts, get the Dolphins out of the game. And you saw a lot of good things for the Dolphins in that series at the Ferry Hawks, getting those 3 wins, coming off the win over Caldwell and the 2 wins over Holy Family. And maybe after today's Dolphin Pod, after this recording, we'll see if they can get a win over Adelphi, and then on Saturday against Holy Family once again.
Well, it was a thriller against Adelphi. Earlier in the season, the Dolphins tied the score going into the bottom of the ninth. They scored 2 in the top half of the ninth. Adelphi then walked it off in the bottom half of the ninth inning. The Dolphins will be looking for some revenge later today when this episode is being recorded. You'll know how it turned out on Saturday. But, Nick, that's not the only exciting moment for CSI Baseball this year. Early in the season, right around the time when softball came back on March 14th, just a couple of days later, baseball returned to their home field, and 2 big milestones were reached.
Yeah, we saw Mike Morrow get his 300th career win as a CSI head coach, and it was a great game against Dominica in that one. That was one where we saw Gerard Santos go the full distance, get the complete game shutout. 10-0 win for the Dolphins in that one as well. To get Mike that historic mark, it took a little bit of time for him to get that historic mark, nonetheless, but certainly one that the Dolphins were looking forward to getting for him. And we know how much he contributes to this, university and the team itself. But to get that 300th career win certainly was one that I was, very happy to be on the call with.
Certainly one of the calls that I am most proud of as Coach Morrow got the Gatorade bath. But also in that game, or at least in that series of games during that week, I believe it was the same game.
I think it was.
Thomas Martin, 100th career hit. He has a chance for 4 consecutive 30-hit seasons. Martin has had a tremendous career, and he still has another 4 games to go. One coming up today, of course, another tomorrow at Caldwell. And then if you're watching this episode, when it premieres, 2 games coming up next against Holy Family University. So Martin certainly with a chance to make it another 30-hit season. He's had a tremendous career.
And I'm trying to remember the doubleheader that he had 2 home runs against. I think it was against Lincoln. You can correct me if I'm wrong. But that was one where we saw Martin hit a home run game number 1, and a home run that I certainly have not seen here at CSI. One over the batter's box in center field, a mammoth shot. I'm not sure the exact feet. I think Mike told you the exact feet of that home run.
I believe it was 436.
Yeah, that's a considering the you don't really see home runs go out to center field here at CSI, but Martin has been a big reason why the Dolphins have a lot of offensive numbers for the season. One that they're certainly unfortunately going to miss after this season. He's going to be graduating as he was honored on Saturday on Senior Day, but he's been a huge reason why the Dolphins are in a lot of games this season, whether he's in the field or just hitting as DH.
I would say that the series, when Martin hit those home runs, is about where the Dolphins peaked this year. It was during a 4-game sweep against Lincoln University that the Dolphins found themselves in a pretty good position to qualify for the conference postseason. Unfortunately, things didn't turn out the way they had hoped. They're in the midst of a losing streak right now, but we did see some flashes from a lot of these newcomers and some returning players this year that really stepped up in a big way, giving the Dolphins some reasons for optimism heading into next season. Unfortunately, 2024 will end with the team missing the playoffs.
And I think if you're the team looking at how the season went, it was very up and down, kind of like a roller coaster ride for this team as a whole. But you see a lot of good things from this team. Chris Polomini, who I'm sure we'll mention in just a little bit, a monster year 1 for this team, hitting above 340, I think, on the season. AJ Vigliotti, once again, providing huge numbers. I think about 320 batting average and a couple of home runs. That home run against Adelphi tied the game at 5 at that point until the Dolphins lost on a walk-off. But you saw a lot of good things overall from this team, and I think when you look at it, yes, you're losing guys like Martin and Burkhead and Nick Campese at the end of the season, but there's still a huge roster for this team that could provide some spark for the team going into next year. We'll have to see how it all unfolds, but I think another thing to look forward to is they have 4 capable starters going into next season that can give you an opportunity to maybe get some wins and get out of some jams. We saw a lot of opportunities this year where the Dolphins had second out, 2 outs in the inning, could not get the final third out of the inning, or unfortunately errors went down a long way into them losing games. If they can fix those mistakes next year, they really have a good chance of making the playoffs.
And I think that's one of the reasons for optimism around this team. The mistakes they made this year are correctable. Not being able to find the strike zone, some miscues in the field, little things that add up over the course of season and cost you games. Those are the things that plague the Dolphins for much of this year. We know this team can score runs. We know this team can hit. Chris Polomini, a menace on the bases, well on his way to potentially setting a program record for stolen bases in a single season. We look forward to seeing whether or not he's able to surpass that mark in the coming games. But there are reasons for optimism surrounding the CSI baseball team going into next year, and we'll see if they can make good on that in 2025. However, we cut off our softball discussion very deliberately at around the midpoint of March because from there, conference play began, and from there, things got really exciting for this Dolphins team. They were in it up until the final game of the season. Unfortunately, they came up just short.
And I think that was a doubleheader where we saw a lot of things go the Dolphins' way, and unfortunately, the game 2, things didn't go the Dolphins' way. Game 1, we saw Kennedy Ruth, who we already mentioned, going the full distance, getting a complete game. I think around 70 pitches she threw in that game as well, so was able to pitch in the second game of that doubleheader. But you also saw Nisa Acosta, 2 home runs in that game, a lot of 2-out hitting as well. Everything that seemed to go the Dolphins' way in game 1 went their way, and it gave them that 4-1 win. Unfortunately, in game number 2 is where the difference was the story of that game. Alexandra Frenza pitched a great game overall in that one. Unfortunately, gave up 1 home run, which was the difference of the game. 3 more runs in the 5th inning allowed it to be a 4-0 game. And the Dolphins had their opportunities to win. And unfortunately, it came down to some bad bounces, and it didn't go their way. They had some opportunities to maybe tie it or at least trim the deficit going into the 7th inning, but they lose 4-0. But I think if you're Tracy Garofalo on your team, I think there's a lot of optimism as well for them going into next season. You're returning a lot of key players that were huge for them this year. You mentioned Balderas, Acosta. How about Olivia Wanser had a monster first year for the team? You saw Amanda Stalker pick it up at the end of the season as well. Those are 4 players that are the top 4 of your lineup that if you're going into next season, we know this team can hit. If they can continue that hitting mark and maybe get some quality innings from their starters in Ruth and Frenza, this team can make the playoffs after just missing out this year.
And I think we just might see quite a few all-conference honorees from the CSI softball team. That list will officially come out on Thursday. It will be announced at the ECC Softball Championship. So be sure to tune in over at our CSIDolphins.com website, ECCSports.org, and, of course, our CSI Athletics social media channels at CSI Dolphins for the latest regarding all-conference honorees for CSI softball. Baseball, of course, will have to wait one additional week as there are still conference games to be played throughout the rest of the ECC coming up this weekend. The Dolphins have completed their conference schedule, and, of course, CSI will come up short of the playoffs this year, 7-17 in conference play on the baseball side. But one final point about softball, Nick. You mentioned all of the returners that will have a big impact for CSI softball next year. A lot of their games came down to the closing innings. There were games that they led. Those leads got away. I think the Dolphins must have lost on a walk-off at least 3 times in the last couple of weeks. They had 2 big losses at Mercy. If one of those games had gone their way, it would have been a huge swing in terms of that final day of the season. And then, of course, taking on Malloy, the Dolphins very nearly swept that doubleheader, but Game 2 got away as the Dolphins lost the lead in the final inning. Dolphins were 1 or 2 outs recorded away from a playoff spot this year. They were just so close, and hopefully next year they can finally break through and into the conference postseason. We are longing for postseason baseball and softball here at the College of Staten Island. We've gotten a taste in every other sport. We've at least had 1 soccer team, 1 basketball team, of course, swimming, making their debut in the NE10 championship. We need some spring postseason baseball and softball.
Yeah, I think for softball, I mentioned it a lot during the season and a lot of our broadcasts. This team was very resilient. And you mentioned it. They would fight to the very end of the game, final out. And sometimes they would get some, key wins. Sometimes they would lose on a walk-off. But you like to see that from your team, not giving up giving up early on and keeping the game very close and entertaining. And we saw that on Saturday because if they had lost game 1, then they easily could have thrown in the towel for game number 2. But getting that game 1 win, at least making game number 2 an all-important win-and-in scenario for the Dolphins was huge. And I think that's another thing that you have to look forward to going into next season, that if this team could show the resilience and the heart that they showed all year here in 2024, 2025 could be a very special year for the Dolphins softball team.
Well, there was a spring championship for CSI Athletics. I think you might know where I'm going with this, Nick, but esports has done it again. Nick, have you ever played Rocket League?
I have.
You have? You're any good?
I haven't played in a couple years, so I probably have lost my rust on it.
Were you any good?
I was all right. I was decent.
Right. Well, my level of coordination when it comes to Rocket League is non-existent. I am not a good Rocket League player. I'm that guy that you kind of put in the backpack and carry along.
Would you play the goalie?
Yeah, no.
No. Okay.
No. I'm watching these guys boost through the air and knock the ball toward goal. I'm like, how are they doing this with such coordination? Though I think some of them are probably on PC. I was on console, so I'm at a bit of a disadvantage, but nonetheless, CSI Esports overcomes the University of New Haven to win yet another East Coast Conference Rocket League championship. And as someone who has competed at least at an average level, Nick, you know how hard it is to go in there against the best of the best and come away with a win. The Dolphins take yet another ECC title.
Yeah, congratulations to the Rocket League team for getting that job done. And I think, we mentioned a lot. We play a lot of sports, whether it could be competitive, whether it's, MLB, NFL, NBA, all those type of sports. It's really tough to be able to be competitive in a sport like that. And I've played Rocket League before. It's not easy to play that game, folks. It is a very tough game to play.
I can attest.
It's basically playing soccer, but with cars. So it's not easy whatsoever. But to get another championship done for that team, job well done.
Well, Nick, we had to defend one of our championships. Obviously, back in the fall, we were embarrassed quite a bit in the faculty and staff versus students basketball game.
Don't watch that one again, folks.
Do not, please, though we did cover it via the Dolphin Pod.
It
was a good show, but it didn't necessarily reflect well on our basketball ability.
Right.
Nonetheless, we had another students versus faculty staff event a couple of weeks ago as we had our football game. You were calling CSI Softball. I was engineering the game for you and was ill, but I did head over to the field and take in the last couple of minutes to make sure that they didn't need me to come in for one play. I have to admit, I was itching to get in there, couldn't play, but I was able to watch, and team staff narrowly holds on. They won by one score as time expired with them in possession of the football.
They might have needed us. Last year we had a very convincing win in that game, but at least we held on. We get our title back, and now we have softball coming up in just a couple of days, so we'll have to make it 2 in a row over the students, but that's the game I'm looking forward to the most. I love the softball game overall. I'm very upset I couldn't make the football game this year. I enjoyed that last year, regardless, even if I made one catch, which was the first catch of the game.
You were on the roster.
That was it. That's all I needed to do.
That's all right.
So we'll see, but nice job at least holding the fort down and getting that win in football.
Let's just say the great food may have had more to do with me showing up there for the end than the game itself. Of course,
Sal does know how to get us some very good food for those games.
He sure does. Sal Caruso, our intramurals coordinator, as always, doing a great job. And as Nick mentioned, we have our students versus faculty and staff softball game coming up, which means the Dolphin Pod will be there. We are going to be broadcasting live from the dugout. We'll have one camera in the dugout with our setup, and we'll have one camera pointed at the plate. So it should be a lot of fun. Hopefully there are no foul balls taking out any equipment, but I think we'll be okay. And, Nick, before we wrap up this latest episode of the Dolphin Pod, there is one final point I'd like to make. I scripted it yesterday. The Finnies are coming in 2024, our CSI Athletics end-of-year awards dinner, where our athletes will be recognized both through team awards and department awards. The coaches, of course, choosing winners of 3 awards that they have created for their own teams. Out of those winners of department awards will be chosen. We hope to stream all of the Finnies on CSI Sportsnet. That remains to be seen, but it gives both me and our student athletes plenty to look forward to following the end of the season.
I don't envy anyone trying to make those decisions on who wins those awards, so good luck to everyone.
I would love to get your opinion on some of those. We'll have to do that off camera.
Right.
I know who the nominees are, but
lips sealed.
I am the host, and I will be joined hosting the Finnies by my CSI Sportsnet colleague, Nick Durst, who works, of course, over at the communications office. Nick and I very much look forward to hosting the Finnies this year. We hope that you'll tune in if we are able to stream the event on the ECC network. That is coming up 3 days after this episode of the Dolphin Pod airs. So for my co-host, Nick Bivona, thanks for watching. My name is Joe Foreman, and this has been the Dolphin Pod. You can tune into new episodes of the Dolphin Pod as they premiere over at our CSI Sportsnet YouTube channel, or you can check out the audio-only version at csidolphins.com/podcasts. If you're not already at the baseball complex, get here. Heroes Day is getting underway in just a few short minutes as the Dolphins take on Holy Family University. It is the regular season finale for CSI Baseball. Don't miss it. And thanks for watching.